Hello. My name is Nate Rasa and welcome again to my channel. I didn't think I'd be making another one of these personal musings videos, but here we are, because I clearly have a lot of things to say and a platform to say them in. Today's topics are going to revolve around my experience and insights from the ENFP panel that I participated in. I'll have the link below, where the wonderful Joyce interviewed a bunch of male ENFPs to see, hear, observe, and really see how we all agree or disagree. At this point, it's also kind of a funny joke now too. There was like one prompt question that was asked, but because of the nature of ENFP's tendency, we just ended up derailing to a multitude of topics anyway. I also want to address a few points made during the panel that I think would be beneficial with more explanation. Especially any opinions that I hold or beliefs that I value. I feel like these personal musing videos are really just a window, like into a window that's getting to know who I am, how I think, and how I operate. I've already kind of spent my years with this "I'm just misunderstood" narrative that basically has evolved and grown into something more positive, allowing me to discuss that and what has changed over the course of my life. So as always, a lot of my understandings and insights are generally my opinion. I highlighted in my previous personal musings video that a lot of the basis of my type knowledge comes from multiple sources. What I seek is useful data that promotes or engages in communication and cognitive language fluency. I will also provide some timestamps as to where you, the audience or the watcher, might find the specific points and topics that I'm talking about for easy and convenient viewing. And before I forget, forgive me for I am also using an outline for this. As always, just makes things easier for me to organize my thoughts and to keep a lot of these topics together at hand. So the topics that I'm going to go over today, I have a feeling too that this is probably going to take a long video, but we'll see how this goes. So the topics are namely speaking in absolutes, radical honesty, cynicism, negativity, toxic positivity, practicality, compromise. Perhaps I'll even dabble into some shadow work and some assumptions about ENFPs. So we're just going to get into that and just jump right in and just get started. If any of you folks have watched the panel, you've seen my tendency to speak in absolutes. I like to make statements that provoke and entice folks to react because most of my life I generally speak generally. My conversation flow tends to be figurative, full of metaphors, hypotheses, and just a lot of non-practical, down-to-earth concepts. I've thought of this phenomenon as the Anydom's kind of affinity for being comfortable with intangible topics. The realm of ideas, taboo or not, the realm of theories and myths, all of these things are very entertaining to me. However, if you were to ask me a specific example in the real world, or to just say it as it is, you'll find that this is going to be a little bit difficult. You'll actually notice me basically beating around the bush, which really just translates as IBS a lot of topics. And there are a couple of reasons why I think this happens. So the first one is that, and I'm just going to read this off of my outline, any is conscious pattern connecting. I won't always know the point that I'm trying to make. I have to chase the spark of thought and explore until I find it. Call it generally being lost all the time. I didn't say it was efficient because it's not, and I didn't say it was effective because it isn't, but it's what I got. And I happen to really enjoy the process of connecting patterns as a pastime. And the second part is, any isn't just pattern connecting. There's also a speed factor, which leads to that second point of, the whole thing related to beating around the bush. Why that happens, we don't stay on a topic for too long to really get to its point because we'd rather just get the gist or just the main idea and then move on. Think of it, the best metaphor I can think of in that context is bees seeking to pollinate or collect nectar from a sea of flowers. So rather than just kind of staying in at one flower till you take all that nectar. You take a little bit in one, you move on to the next one. You take a little bit in the next one, you move on to the next one. So what this does is it allows us to explore as many topics as possible, or in the back to the metaphor of the bees, many flowers as possible. We can't do it by taking our time per topic, is how I see it. I also see it as kind of like cutting corners in a way. There are positives though to this type of style of thinking. Being an NE dominant such as myself, by default, kind of puts me in a mental space of handling large amounts of information readily. I feel as though that for the folks who don't have any in the higher stacks, and I mean this in the dominant or auxiliary function stack, or those who don't even value the function period, I feel like this type of thinking will manifest as a form of stress for the other person, or for this kind of person. There could be moments of fear, paranoia, other factors that would make a person not want to do that. So keeping in mind the conscious pattern connecting concept, aside from just following a string to an end, I also see it as following multiple strings and then intersecting the strings as you move forward. This becomes an advantage in the sense that, any users can recall concepts by relating it to other concepts that they've also learned. I would even wager that some NE DOMs can probably predict certain things by just recalling the other concepts running in our minds and just using that as kind of the framework for the future. So once you have information, or at least once you have a lot of information, you're also able to connect the dots faster and better. So that kind of just equals some kind of form of predicting, is really how I see it. So how does all of this that I've babbled related to speaking in absolutes? So now that I've outlined how I think, conscious pattern connecting can be a quiet activity or spoken out loud, with or without company. The situation that I'm thinking about are when I am with company, speaking in my extroverted intuitive style is going to be chaotic and lack foundation. There's going to be a clear disconnect between what my position is or what my angle is. What am I even arguing for? What is any of this for? Those are really kind of the questions that I've learned that people ask. People tell me that they really think about when I speak. This is usually just a normal, typical conversation with me. I've learned that there are people in the world who see that my kind of conversation style speaking style is not just different, highly ineffective, and highly inefficient. Does that bother me? No, I don't see that as a bother. This is my style and I use it well. However, I could sit here and flatter myself, or I can take a deep breath and shift my delivery. Over the years of my existence, and I mean that figuratively because I am still young, still in my 20s, I also find that the message I want in the world, the message that I want the world to hear, that takes more priority now than just the style that I'm comfortable with. So I've learned that when I speak in absolutes, I'm not actually picking a side. I'm putting a footprint on reality. I'm making an impact. I've also realized that that footprint isn't the end of the world. Communication is a dynamic and living thing. If you make a mistake with your words, that's why you have words to explain, elaborate, and fix. In a way, that all kind of boils down to me believing that the world isn't as unforgiving as I used to think it was. So take for example, the J's, all the J types. How are they so comfortable speaking and commanding? It isn't because them taking a stance was premature in any way. It's that a stance made or decided upon was the best move to make in the moment. In my main circle of friends, and this is like the innermost radius of social contacts, none of them are intuitives. One of them even is an EJ. So I've learned saying nothing is equivalent to a stance. Saying I don't know is a stance. Does that bother me? Also no, because I don't see why it should. In the context of dealing with foreign language in a foreign country, for example, there are customs to respect and acknowledge. I see communication as stepping into an individual's own worldview, which in essence, I see it as also stepping into their own country. What value does my communication style and cognitive type have to them if I didn't even give them a reason to value it? And they aren't going to do that by me waving my flag and calling attention to myself when I'm trying to connect with them on their turf. So in a way, what I'll do is I'll do the opposite, learn their ways and what makes them who they are, and then translate my thoughts into something that they'll understand. There's a lovely phenomenon actually that when I did this for the first time, those people who I used to think would never understand me actually grew in curiosity and started asking me how I thought or how I think or how they could adapt their own thinking to speak to me. So I got a connection. Something I didn't think I would have had if I just didn't switch up my talking style, if I just took that initiative, or because I took initiative on my part, the phenomenon happened. So going back to talking in absolutes, on one end, I use it to arouse a reaction from the audience. I watch a lot of comedy roasts, and I love a good statement that just stuns a person. However, on the other end, it's an opportunity to connect with someone. It's a method I use because I learned that some people appreciate a concrete statement more than just a vague essay. And sometimes, a lot of what I can say, actually most of the time, a lot of what I can say can be distilled into a good, effective sentence, or a single effective sentence, which is also hard work. Mind y'all, the fact that I'm babbling is the more easier route. The speaking, finding a way to distill everything into that's the one that's a challenge for me. I don't think any of what I'm doing, especially in this moment, is easy or comfortable, but we do it to get the message across. Not because I need that person, whoever that person is listening to this, to validate me. That does not compute in this computation, this formula. So, when I say things like, humans were a mistake, or most of the time, people have been there as a disappointment to me, that's a stance I took to arouse a reaction and provide the basis of a conversation. You're gonna get a lot of, what do you mean by that? Or care to explain more why you think people are a disappointment? Well, first of all, it's a joke with an underlying meaning. We can all agree that 2020 has been a really hard year. And to say that, oh, I still believe humans are wonderful creatures is also a true statement. However, I'd argue that the impact that you make differs because of the word choice. By framing my statements into something more provocative, you could also incite thinking to happen. If you were a hearer or a listener, you would end up reacting or thinking. Does it matter what you think of me? Not necessarily. However, my statement will indeed cause something. We could even debate the correctness of my statement, or you can just understand that I'm picking a devil's advocate position for a reason. Do I actually think humans were a mistake? Obviously not. However, I'm not a sage with thousands and thousands of years of experience. I'm merely a young person making an emotional statement for the sake of what I hoped was a comedic reaction. To answer the hypothetical question of why I think humans were a mistake, let's just even follow down that rabbit hole for a second. Nothing today in the realm of the modern world now is interesting unless it's dramatic or dark. So positive news are often invisible news. And what I mean by that is that no one's really covering the story of a newborn baby being born to two new parents, even though to them that is a really big deal, but no one really cares. And another one is, for example, like those moments of dropping your kid off to school, right? Nobody cares, unfortunately. But if you want a more concrete or something that's a little bit better example, I was thinking another line of, well, what about those new breakthroughs in science that we've invented something, or we found a bacteria that helps digest plastic that's locked in, or that's, plenty in the sea, into something that can be biodegradable. Those are wonderful news. It's just that they're not as frequent or as easily accessible to the masses. What is easily accessible are the fear kinds, the negative kinds, the things that make you wonder why you even bother turning on the news to begin with. Unfortunately, those things became interesting to the masses, which is kind of sad, but that is life. Also just want to add that because I'm just a human being, I'm allowed to make emotional statements to convey what I'm feeling inside, whether or not that's accurate. Because in a way, it's something to get it off of my chest. So whether or not, let's put it this way, those who relate to that would, and those who wouldn't. To me, that seems pretty simple. So moving on to my next point, which is radical honesty. This connects to, well, the concept of regret. So I've been raised by my parents, especially my mom, that when what comes out of my mouth, I cannot take back. So no matter how much I regret, the damage or the impact of my words would have already been done. So my parents took this principle and they applied it in their lives by pretty much avoiding to speak anything that they might regret or cause trouble. So you can see that there's a lot of silence and quietness, and there's a lot of conscious and guiltness going on with that type of mentality. I, on the other hand, took that principle to a different direction. To me, this kind of principle comes off limiting when I first heard it and when I first being taught it. I appreciate the sentiments that words have power, and then there's an effect that happens through using your words. You could impact another person emotionally or make them react a certain way because of it. But to hold your lips and not share your truth, to me, feels like a disservice to honesty. I might be wrong in my judgment. I mean, Lord knows I'm quite judgmental. I might completely be incorrect even in my assumptions. But if I didn't say it out loud, I would basically be denying the world an opportunity for me to learn and for revealing truths to others. To me, speaking out exactly what I'm feeling is an exercise. Is an exercise in and of its own. I'm an Enneagram 7. I would rather rationalize and run away from fear. So this doesn't mean I literally look terrified. Instead, I actually just don't really experience the emotion or feeling such as fear and I guess other negative feelings as much as I think I do. Just this week, I feel like I experienced a couple panic attacks. I had like my temple, my right temple was like pulsating, and just being very irritated, but I just didn't really care about it. Like I just didn't really pay attention to it because I was busy having fun. I was busy trying to pursue something that I was interested in. Sometimes I like to say to myself that I don't really have time to cry or to rest or to relax at times. It's just I need to get things done. My mind, I feel like I have way too many projects to think about, so I can't afford to feel negativity. So in order for me to not live in denial of my feelings, that's why I practice this form of radical honesty. I want to live being fully aware of what my feelings are and give it its space. I don't want to be, in my 50s, incapable of dealing with tougher emotions because I'd rather dismiss it or dismiss what's genuinely my feelings in favor of someone else's truth bulldozing me. It's not fair, it's not right, so let's not do that. To me, radical honesty involves telling myself I'm scared, even when I don't agree with it. Because I've lived most of my life running away from feeling anything related to that. I would shove all of these things down and I would, hide them under the carpet, metaphorically speaking. And I think I'm still guilty of those things. Like, I feel like I still avoid being vulnerable and avoid being honest about if I'm sad, if I'm stressed out. I feel like I still avoid those things. I could tell with my coping strategies that I've just gotten so used to is to just seek distractions, rationalize, separate all these problems and try to reframe it somehow so that I'm better off handling it, even though the best move probably was to just let myself feel it. Procrastination kicks in, actually, is another example that I was thinking about. You procrastinate because you don't really want to see a result, for example. And also I've learned that procrastination is kind of a form of perfectionism because you don't want to allow yourself to feel bad because you're kind of a sore loser. Therefore, you procrastinate. You deny yourself the ability to fail and to learn from failure. So, great. So again, back to radical honesty. I'm not perfect. No one is. Pretty much, these things I have to keep reminding myself. Would this ruffle feathers for others? I would think so. I would ask actually, would the person find it comfortable to sit near me or hear me tell them that I don't like them, or that we'll never be friends, or that I'm not comfortable sharing with you all of the things in my life, or that I think you're bad news, or I want distance for the sake of both of us. I don't think anyone's really wants to hear that, like on the first hit. I do it anyway because I've lived with myself lying to myself, which in essence I also believe is lying to the people around me. Living in a delusion, while everything seems great, let's be real, everything's not great. Does this mean I need pity or I want it? No, I don't really think that. I'm not under illusion of my flaws, especially since I've been practicing this a lot. I clearly state to myself, and as another reminder, that I am my own parent. I have goals and projects to complete. If I don't discipline myself, who's gonna do that for me? That's basically nobody's business but mine. Now that I've thought of it, I probably apply the principles of radical honesty more so to myself than a lot of times. I've wondered how this relates to the art of being tactful. Same thing with the earlier concept I talked about adjusting the style of communication in order for the message to land on the right ears. The principles of that and radical honesty, I feel like they compete for real estate in my mind. It's almost I would like to describe it as living in a constant tension between polarizing concepts. I mean, that's probably why you would call somebody like this a living contradiction, because it sounds like a contradictory thing. So I've made peace with both of those concepts by realizing that I think that the connecting dots between these two that bridges the gap is related to intention. I'm going to tell you, the audience, you the folks out there, the audience, the folks, the people I talk to, I would say in a clear way what my intentions are with whatever it is I'm doing that happens to involve another person. Whether that person is this person, the other person, that I'm talking to, or talking to myself. I'll tell you what I want from you so you have a clear idea of what I'm about. I'll also even tell you what I don't want from you so that you also have a clear idea of why I'm not interacting. Or I'll just bounce. If I'm tired, that's probably the most honest you'll ever really get out of me. Moving on to the third point. Cynicism, negativity, and toxic positivity. Do I have thoughts on this? Referencing back to my previous point of speaking in absolutes that can be both inciting a reaction or just a joke, my tendency for cynical topics falls in the same spectrum. I've made several comments where I would say things like, people have always disappointed me, so let's talk about that. What makes them disappointing? Simple. I've made it a point to struggle on my own when I chose to really go on this journey of self-awareness and radical honesty. So when things get rough or too hard or plain irritating, I'm inclined to comment on the patheticness of life. And it's straight up cathartic to verbalize, and Lord, does it feel good. And this kind of goes hand in hand with if it involves other people. There's a branch of nihilism called optimistic nihilism, which is something that I tend to incorporate in my life a lot. Instead of thinking that, say, the world has no meaning or no value, it doesn't mean that I should give up or do nothing. Rather, I will be the one to provide value and meaning. My decisions are of my intent, and my motivation is because I want to be motivated. I do what I do because I want to do it. And if I don't want to, it's because I have to, and those reasons can fluctuate however the day goes. So as y'all can probably infer, I'm not actually a true cynic, but I operate and talk in ways that might be mistaken as one. I don't really see the world as dying, but I'm not under the delusion of ignorance. I don't mean to be cheesy, but you have to be the change you want to see in the world. I'm not trying to be cheesy, but you went there anyway. The folks I've interacted with and encountered in my life, they tend to not really see this principle in the right light. So if you're not doing your part, then you're not going to get the results that you want. So that's a fundamental core of reality that I personally believe in, and a lot of it kind of just stems back to it being your responsibility. I believe that working together is a good idea? Of course I do. I also believe that our world is complicated because it has a lot of interesting and polarizing individuals. So this makes the planet both disappointing and interesting. The question then comes up is, how do you navigate? I don't believe the folks who say that they have it all figured out. The truth is, no one has it all figured out. We're all on the same boat, trial and error, test and execute, fail and then succeed, and then fail again. Would I say, like, lose my marbles and then hate myself when that happens? I don't think I would. I've spent a good amount of my years in that self-loathing, self-deprecating spiral. Life now, for me, is just a matter of swimming through the chaos and enjoying the stress and rewards that come my way. You stare into the void to see who blinks first, type of thing. Regarding toxic positivity, I believe that there's a line between being inspirational and being downright preachy or inauthentic. No one, and I repeat again, no one is perfect. So what y'all see is a byproduct of work and efforts that are typically done in the sidelines or in the background when no one really talks about or notices usually. And what that means is, when the doors are closed or when the windows are down or when the makeup is off, no one has a camera on them 24/7. So this is just in my opinion, but even myself, I think I'm pretty optimistic and generally a positive person, but I do cringe and I wince a bit whenever I see folks who preach that life has to be good all the time. Life ain't a fairy tale. Life is bound to have ups and downs, and that's okay. Reality can be rough, but like I said before, it is not as unforgiving as one may think. I don't mean to be rude, but those who constantly say good vibes only or always have good thoughts in mind, they come off unrelatable to me. No real human in my experience talks like that or thinks like that. What about those who suffer or experience depression or other kind of illnesses? We're just gonna show up and say, oh yeah, by the way, just get over it. I can do it, why can't you? And to me, that's just a betrayal of empathy and compassion for someone who's clearly working through their problems. Let them feel, let them express. If they wanted to get over it, they probably would have by now. And you're no hero by making them feel condescended to. What about those who have depressive or low moods, that are in flux during the day? Which I think, by the way, is a natural feeling that all humans have. I believe that for those folks, or for the rest of us, that we're allowed to feel bad or even feel good. And, we're allowed to have a sucky day and be angry about it. My only take is that, don't make it someone else's problem by roping them in. Don't, like, for example, it's, say you're pissed and you find yourself driving recklessly. Like, don't do that. Don't risk someone else. If you need help, ask it. You don't have to act on every feeling you have, but you can talk about your feelings. Or at least I believe that people should have space to talk about their feelings and communicate. Mind you, I've done the whole driving thing. I've ended up, snapping myself to my senses when I realized that, like, wait a minute, I'm tailgating like a couple cars in traffic. I'm like, why am I doing this? Wait, am I pissed about something else? If I'm like that, that means this is affecting my mode right now. I need to take another deep breath and then carry on. Resume driving safely. So moving past the third point to my fourth point, which is the practicality and compromise. I don't think I've actually elaborated on this aspect of myself. A girl by the name of Kat, you know who you are, has clarified that I'm not exactly a grounded kind of person, but I am practical. So this is, and I believe I found a couple reasons why. So first of all, my parents are two ISJs. My dad is an ISTJ9 and my mom is an ISFJ6. Both have self-preservation instincts in their stacks. Not entirely yet confident on what is dominant for both of them, but I know that they have both of that going on. And they also have with them as their background, a third world philosophies, and having an outlook on finance that's related to like hold tight so that or else you might lose your coins. I was raised to view money as a resource, and that's not always a means to pleasure. If I were to use it for pleasure, I was to expect consequences. Say you get paid $12 an hour. Sounds nice, but the math that follows is like, so got that $12 an hour. A typical dinner at a restaurant can cost maybe around $15 to $20, depending on what kind of restaurant you're going to, and what kind of orders you're not counting tips or percentages of that or taxes. The question that pops up then is, can you afford to justify eating at that restaurant with working for the 1.5 hours to earn that that coin to pay for that food? Or could you just spend a portion of that on groceries and then cook it yourself at home, so that you also have you cut the cost and you sacrifice that instant gratification? The answer to that question for me, most of the time, yeah, really is. If anything, a lot of my eating outs tend to be only with friends as a means of a hangout or socializing. But most of the time, if I could choose to make it myself and eat at home, eat at home. I consider myself actually kind of a king of delayed gratification. Alcohol parties, I'm down for it. I love drinking, but I can wait. It can wait. Instant cravings, if my bank account can afford it, then so be it. But if I can't, or if I've somehow earned it, we're going with that. But say I earned it by imposing a challenge on myself, then yeah, let's give into that craving. I feel that delayed gratification tastes so much better because I waited for it. An example would be like soda tastes better when you haven't had it for a while. The second reason I was thinking about was I'm a self-preservation 7. I have a transactional mentality towards social contacts and finances. I'm all about getting a bargain. If I could find something cheaper, then why would I spend more when the quality is the same? Or I understand that certain items have worth, but I'd have to parallel that with time. Can I afford? How long or frequently am I going to be using this said item? Or if it's just for aesthetics, maybe I can put it off. Maybe it's because it's not that important for me in the moment. If I'm only bought it to show off, it's probably not a good idea to buy it to begin with. Another question I was thinking of is like, am I currently enjoying some items already, and those items are still in good condition? Do I just want to replace it for the sake of replacing it? The answer would be, I probably wouldn't replace it. Because it's still working. Why? Then I would just have a lot of things in my house, and I don't want to throw away or waste, things that I worked for, that I bought with my own money. To me, it just doesn't make sense. This carries a lot over into my life. I cannot entertain an idea unless there's something to be gained from it. I'll listen to someone else's babble, which is fine, and I think it's also a respectful thing to do that. But my true intentions is waiting to see if you have something to offer to me. Something to put on the table. I'm waiting for an opportunity to use what you know, because life is just full of resources and you just have to know when and where to get them. I believe that my ideas personally, or just ideas in general, needs to have a tether if you actually want things to get done. Limitless ideas is fun. Don't get me wrong, it is fun, but fun to me should always go hand in hand with usefulness. I can enjoy something for what it is, but I need to know that there's a tomorrow for me to have. A thing I usually bring up is like measuring the cliff before you jump it kind of mentality. I got bills to pay the next day. I want to make sure that I can make it home, on time and keep everything clear. I think this is where that whole compromise concept kicks in. I've talked about this briefly in my previous video, where I don't believe that compromise is necessarily giving up yourself. I think that if you connect the dots of compromising with delayed gratifications, you have yourself an outlook of operating this way in different scenarios. So I always ask myself, can I afford to do certain activities or situations? This is kind of an intangible use of the word afford, because I don't think that the world is only about money, but it is a series of transactions. Give and take, no more, no less. So say, for example, I stay up all night. I stay up all night working on a project. I will pay for that with time, probably physical energy and my mood. By tomorrow, I might feel tired because I ended up sleeping late, or probably lethargic, or I'd have a gloomy energy around me. These are things that can happen. So my question is, how important was the project that I would sacrifice my self-care or my happiness? Is it worth being tired and moody? Can I afford to spend an extra few hours if it means just to get a little bit of that instant gratification? So the answer to those questions ends up becoming, no, I can't afford that. I sleep early, I punch out on time, everything in my life is, I try to seek the utmost balance in my life almost all the time, because tipping that would require exceptions, and I have very few exceptions in my life that I'd be willing to give up for that. Very, very few. And and therefore very likely for me, it's very likely for people to hear me say no a lot. Be like, sorry, I can't make it to this day, I am busy today. Or you guys can go ahead and enjoy and have a party, I have things to complete, because if I don't complete this, it's going to cost me and bite me in the butt next time, which I don't want that happening. So moving past this, let's go to point 5, shadow work. I know this was briefly mentioned in the panel. It talks about accessing your other functions that you weren't really aware of or completely, but this is aware of or accessible to. So I'm going to be referring to a couple systems here, or a few different systems. Some personality systems tend to be 4-function models. So MBTI and some other Jung-inspired systems have this. So an example is, I'll just use my type, ENFP. You got NE, FI, TE, SI. 4 functions, that's it. We play around, you got a dominant, you got an inferior, you got little things in the middle, and it's all just, revolving and rotating around the 4. And apparently how your whole life revolves around you being NE when you were a kid, and then learning a little bit of your 3rd function when you get older. A lot of functions, or a lot of systems that teach this, is very popular, actually. And I think it's one of the more popular. I could be wrong though, correct me if I am wrong, but this is something pretty common, especially for those who are recently getting into type. Now, adding on to, there's a thing called 8-function models, which some of them involve shadow work, and some of them involve a different kind of terminology and vocabulary. And this one, in my mind, I'm thinking of socionics. So socionics has an 8-function model. Now, to get the words right, they don't call it functions. Socionics calls it information elements and how they are metabolized in the mind. So there's 8 information elements, or IEs for short. So the point of all of that, all this babble about these different models, is that personally, I feel like I appreciate the wisdom that I've gained from interacting with people whose functions are opposite mine or different from mine. I feel like so much of who I am now is a byproduct of attempting to access and be open to looking at a different perspective than what I'm used to. For example, the internet has completely helped me in meeting a bunch of INFJs who I would say would never have met in real life. There's probably one that I know in real life. In the internet, they populate everywhere. But to hear and really listen to some of the ones that I've grown connected to, and to hear their outlook in life, is something to be said. Really, there's something to be said about it. There's something to be said about the wisdom that they have and how NI functions and how NI operates, that I think is really beneficial. It's also very eye-opening to view the world and how these people view the world, and how like taking a page out of a function's book, especially like, let's say example again as NI, taking that out of seeing a different way to assess my mind, all about it. It's exhausting. I'm not gonna downplay it. If you want to look into something that you're not accustomed to, it's like going against what you're wired to do, and it's like learning a new language. There's gonna be hurdles, and they're not gonna be easy. Some are gonna be really high, and I mean I could probably say this the same for TI especially, but yeah, like these are just things that everybody has different ways of communicating because of said function. It's a thing. Part of all of this goes back to my desire to have a comprehensive and complete scope of personality and worldview. To me, I dislike limiting my worldview. I also think that mine isn't the only one, or is the only valid one. I cannot comprehend not being able to make space for someone else that I believe deserves to exist. And who knows, that person might have wisdom too, and is just waiting for me to use it or to figure out what it is. Also, I've noticed that I've been talking. I've overestimated the length of this video. I thought it was going to be one of those 20-minute videos, and I realized that I definitely went over this whole thing. So I realized I'm gonna have to divide this video into 2 parts. So the second part will be a lot more of my appreciation for the other functions, and definitely diving into that shadow thing again. I don't think I got the right words or covered it, so if you guys can catch the mistakes I've made for this part of the section, I know. Don't worry, I know. So I'm gonna say I also forgot that there's also that whole thing of assumptions about ENFPs. I think I have quite a few points as well to add to that, which I think would fit into a different video. So yeah, like assumptions about ENFPs, I'll definitely make a personal musings. Gosh, I feel like I'm making a series, and it wasn't my intention. So I intend to throw my thoughts out there. I didn't intend for it to turn into this. So well, there we go. Now it has to be my intention. Let's make it happen. So with that being said, I'm going to pause my stream of consciousness. Stay tuned for the next one. And thanks everyone again for listening and hanging out with me today. I hope you folks enjoy the rest of your day, week, month, year. The year's almost over. And so let's party. I would say ideally at home where it's safe. So with that being said, thanks again. Bye.